Do you remember when everywhere we went suddenly had to have an Instagrammable moment? And instead of stores, everyone was rushing to open experience centers? Well, now that we're no longer having, experiences, what's the next wave of retail going to look like? Justin Huxol, one of the modern masters of retail design, has some ideas. For the last few months, he's been helping brands re-engage their audiences with some really innovative concepts. My colleague Fred Nicolaus is going to chat with Justin about the future of store design and what lessons trade brands can take away from what's going on in consumer retail.
Justin.
Hi there.
Hey, welcome. Have a seat. Great. Excellent. So, how was the walk over here?
It was amazing.
Wonderful.
Went rug shopping along the way.
Got it. Picked up a few things.
Yeah.
So I want to start. You have kind of like a dubious honor, which is one of your retail projects was one of the first to be shut down by the coronavirus. Why don't you tell us about that a little bit?
So we've been working with Fila to come up with retail concepts for their Fila tennis line for the various tennis opens that they sponsor. And literally the night that we finished the store for the BNP Open in California, we get done, we leave, we drive back to LA and literally get a phone call that says, we're canceling the entire sports event and you've just designed a 5,000 square foot store for nobody. It was a first casualty of the virus.
Did you have a sense, first of all, the first of many, and it's kind of it's not a proud distinction, but did you have a sense that was going to be happening all over at the time? Or did it completely come out of nowhere? Like, what was your sense of what was to come?
While we were actually installing the store, we already had the trepidations in full gear, and there were already pretty intense concerns for safety already right before that. So we kind of had that coming.
Gotcha. Well, I do want to talk a lot about COVID, but let's roll it back a little bit earlier. You're a retail designer. I'm curious. What are the big ideas in retail before COVID? What's going on? What's hot right now, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I think a lot of people have this, sense that it's all about, Instagrammable moments and experiential retail. Is that still happening? Is that over? Give us a sense of where we are.
I'd say that experiential retail kind of hit its kind of peak at an initial phase where everybody was really obsessed with the Instagram moment and all that kind of thing. But I feel like that moment came and went, and that we've kind of progressed on to something that has to be a little bit more meaningful, has to have a little bit more retention, and also is a little bit more responsive to the fact that the various digital platforms that support those have also kind of moved on beyond that kind of, glorification of just having a photo on your feed.
Right. Well, let's break that down a little bit. Like, you say we're beyond that. Is that basically just saying that, like, a picture in front of a flower wall isn't going to get you like 1 million likes anymore? Is that basically what that means?
I think so. I think that people have they're not as impressed with it anymore. And being able to give people an experience that might be a little bit more fortifying in terms of self kind of promotion, or a little bit more of a brand connection with that experience, I think is a little bit more important these days.
So what does that look like? What does that actually mean? Like, what are some examples of that?
I would say that I like to think of it more in terms of like a service-based kind of experience, where we're seeing a lot of brands that are actually trying to add value to your experience in the retail environment. So, you're not just taking away a selfie, and you're not just using that as collateral for the brand itself's own promotion, but instead, you're going to brick and mortar location. You're actually having an experience that might be service-based, so that you have either a consultation or you're actually receiving an actual service, like a procedure or trials in the beauty and wellness and fitness area. You're actually having that kind of one-to-one interaction with a guided kind of experience. And you're also seeing kind of the overlapping or hyper-programming of retail stores, so that you have, one example would be our work that we've done with Bandier, where we take, somebody who's coming to shop for leggings, and they're able to experience an in-shop Nike activation, but also they can have a bookable service to have a facial, and also they can have a fitness consultation. And we also designed a fitness studio inside of the store so that you can actually take a class. So there's a lot of kind of touch points that make that whole kind of brand allegiance, be something that is a living, breathing kind of manifestation of wellness in that case.
Right, you get a dental cleaning,
I mean,
get a few procedures done, and the start, right?
You name it, we try to fit it into some sort of retail experience.
Yeah. Is it because beauty and fashion kind of lend themselves towards that sort of thing? Are there any other examples of, service retail, I guess it's called, that, jump out at you as interesting? I think we were talking earlier about this Prada thing where they have their archive in the store. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Prada is a great example too in terms of, they pivot their real estate to turn into a cultural kind of experience. So they do exhibits. You can go and interact with former collections digitally within their flagship stores. You are able to use it as an educational experience instead of just a transactional one.
Right. So you're kind of in an interesting position because you design these retail environments that are largely for consumers, but as a shopper, you're an interior designer, so you're shopping in the trade. Right. I'm curious, are there lessons that trade brands can take away from what's going on in consumer retail? Like, do small furniture brands and fabric houses need to get better at in their trade retail spaces? Like, what can they do to capitalize on this?
Right. One good example, I think, would be Restoration Hardware with what they've done with their galleries in terms of having a dining experience folded into that.
Right.
That shows me that they're sensitive to the needs of the shopping experience of a designer and client. Right. You're not going for a 10-minute stop to look at furniture. You're actually needing to mull over it and confer with your client and so forth. Right. So that by actually dedicating that real estate to that kind of experience, you're giving a little bit more, and that's I think it's a more valuable kind of service-based retail experience.
What about like smaller, more like tradey brands though? Because obviously not every small fabric line in the D&D can set up a restaurant, right next to the samples. Like,
sure.
What are ways that like smaller or mid-sized brands can tap into this? Like, you go into these design centers, you shop in these showrooms. Like, what do you wish there was that you draw from your own experience that isn't there now?
Yeah, I think looking at showrooms, it's a twofold kind of value add for designers. Yeah. One is inquiry and the other is discovery, right? And so for your inquiries, you have the ability to transfer data to the designer, whether that's through product information, specification sheets, swatches, all that kind of stuff. And so there's a very transactional nature to that. But in addition to that, there's a great opportunity here for that, again, that kind of like service retail where you might utilize that space of the showroom to foster, more than just like an opening with a wine tasting and so forth. But right. How can we potentially pivot and utilize showrooms for a venue for designers, for meetings, for being able to actually bring clients in and linger longer and actually have a take home that might be a little bit more valuable, maybe educate them a little bit more than just showing them product.
Right, give them, because designers always talk about how they almost don't want to bring their clients into trade showrooms because it's overwhelming. Their clients get overwhelmed with the options. And so if there's an experience that's specifically for clients, there's a reason to bring them in and get them engaged.
Right.
This is all 5 years down the line, of course, once we're through this time. But one thing that we've talked about, which I think is really interesting, is this idea of trade brands not having great digital assets. And I think it's a really interesting challenge because, you look at like really big retail companies, they can make digital models of all their, whirligigs, but it's tough for like a mid-sized trade brand to develop a digital rendering of everything they do. Do you think they should really put their money into that right now?
I think one of the things, just reflecting on kind of where we've been with COVID and innovations that have happened from there, I think that looking at the real estate world, for example, and seeing how that industry, you go onto Street Easy these days, the descriptions are amazing, the photographs are killer, everything has a floor plan, you have the ability to, do a virtual tour of a property, and so forth. And so that industry has really catapulted forward because of this. Yeah. And I think that there's an opportunity for showrooms in the home sector to be able to, really look at what the opportunity is there for giving, we've done some Zoom sessions with Moroso, for example, during COVID, where we were viewing videos that gave you the backstory to product development, giving you a little bit more meat on those bones for you to be able to interact with your clients. And so I think that there's some real value in being able to up your game with the transactional data transfer, so that we're not kind of getting scrappy.
Getting a fax.
We really need,
Yeah.
in this day and age, especially when everything is, we're working remotely, give us the digital assets that we can so that we can put it into our renders so that we can present it to clients and so forth.
Right.
And that's been a struggle, in the past with some brands. So
No, I know. I mean, the trade, has not every corner of it has been quick to jump on the digital train, and I think this has been, a rude awakening for some brands, but something that's coming one way or the other. So let's jump into COVID a little bit. So you're working with a lot of retail brands out there. It's kind of tough because in New York we have one reality, and in LA it's different, and so forth. But let's just jump into New York. Beyond what retail brands are asking you for, what time horizon are they looking at? Are they looking beyond COVID? Are they looking for the next 6 months? Tell me about like how long term they're thinking.
Sure. I think in New York we have a very short-term breakneck pursuit of, how do we take advantage of, a giant glut of extra open space right now, right? So we've got a lot of open real estate, and I'm seeing a lot of brands are approaching us actually to figure out how do we come up with a kind of a novel retail concept during this time, activate open spaces on a 3 to 4 month prospectus, and be able to then, kind of test ideas from here. And I think that that's something that right now, everybody's kind of wondering, where does actual transactional retail happen in New York? So giving people maybe an out of the ordinary experience or a reason to come and explore and interface with their brand in this particular moment, it raises a lot of opportunity there.
Right. So like everything is kind of a pop-up right now.
Pretty much. And then obviously, the evergreen brands and legacy brands are looking how do we kind of reinvent ourselves post-COVID. And so we're also working with other brands, fashion brands and such that are looking how are we going to move forward and produce a space where people feel safe, people feel that it's still welcoming and so forth.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because it's like I think we're in phase 4. I feel stupid for not knowing. We're in a good phase in New York, but it's even though technically a lot of retail is allowed to be open, I don't think it's not my sense that people are rushing back into stores, and so giving them a reason to kind of come out. So what are some like innovative, interesting things you've seen either that you've worked on or you've seen in the market? Like what are the smart people doing right now?
Sure. I think we're living it day to day right now, so we're kind of on the forefront working with clients. So a lot of it is kind of still under wraps, and we're still in the design phase. But we are seeing obviously an activation of the commons. So you've got your hospitality, restaurateurs and such are taking over their outdoor spaces and such. Some interesting ones, in Fort Greene in Brooklyn, we have a public park that's divided, and there's a kind of a timeshare between 2 restaurants. So it's quite interesting. It's going beyond the kind of initial reaction to taking over 2 parking spaces in front of the restaurant. So how do we take on the public realm and start to activate that for a retail experience? Our clients, Hot Pilates in LA, they started at the beginning of COVID, as many fitness brands did, online doing live activations and such, Instagram Live. And now, they're looking into how do we take over a parking lot for the next 5 months and actually have one-on-one training sessions and fitness classes and so forth.
Right. Yeah. God, Hot Pilates would be tough to do. Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting how there's this it's kind of sad because all these restaurants can't be open inside, and so that space can be taken over by. There's a lot of crazy shuffling going on, which is sort of interesting. Longer term, are people even thinking that far ahead, or are they just trying to take advantage of the next 3 to 4 months? Like, are people thinking when you have conversations, are people going well, in 6 months we'll probably be back to normal, or what's your sense about how people are thinking beyond this time?
I think that they're definitely thinking on both timeframes, right? So we're developing another interesting kind of innovation is thinking about mobile activations. So we're working on a mobile store essentially for one customer. Where you can go and you can have a service inside of this trailer. There have been some interesting innovations on that front over the past few years. You've got Fenty and Puma doing mobile stores. You've got all kinds of really interesting things like that.
So it's just a trailer that one person walks to. It's completely autonomous.
Completely.
And it just sprays it down with bleach at the end. And how does it work? Yeah.
And in effect, they're literally watching in real time as which cities are the best to go to right now. Where is it the most safe? where do people actually feel comfortable going out and interacting with brands in person.
Right, that's interesting, yeah. So one thing I want to talk about is sort of like the materiality of COVID, because we've seen this big trend towards, home is everywhere. We've covered it at BOH, this idea that all retail stores want to kind of feel like home and have all these like soft surfaces.
Right.
Are people kind of like doubling back on that and going like, whoa, we need, how are people talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of our clients in the past have really tried to veer towards the residential kind of aesthetic in their retail spaces, and so again, I think it comes back to it's both scientific but also highly emotional, that kind of physical interaction with the materiality of the space.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out what are the actual claddings of surfaces that make you feel like, hey, this actually has just been cleaned and actually can hold up to the wear and tear of.
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting distinction, like scientific versus emotional, because I don't want to get ahead of my skis here, but it's my understanding that it's like surface transmission is not as big of a deal as we thought it would. So is it mostly just making people? It's not so much that you're actually worried about it; it's just mostly making people feel that it's clean. Is that the?
I mean, I think
I don't know. Maybe we should.
We probably all spent.
Yeah, let's get a doctor. Come in,
We probably all spent a week, in March, worrying about a cardboard box from Amazon. Right?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
So
I've burned many. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've all, at this point, we've fallen into these routines. We have this kind of learned behavior over, how we conduct ourselves. So I think that it has definitely carried over to our expectations for retail, and I think that it is probably going to be something that does persist. Right. That just our sensitivities to cleanliness and safety, I think, are probably going to be something that sticks around.
Right. So it won't be home is everywhere; it'll be the doctor's offices everywhere. So I want to talk about that next. How much of this is going to last? And I know no one has a crystal ball here, but how do you think? Just what's your intuition? Like, is this really going to radically change everything for the next 10 years, or is this kind of like a bump in the road that it's not a bump in the road, that's light, but you know what I mean? Like what's going to last from this time in retail design?
Right, I mean, I think the takeaways for retail that will be long-term will be, learning what we have through digital experiences so far through COVID, and I think that, just seeing how many different brands have become so much more active and can actually deliver a lot of value to their communities through digital platforms. I think that that's something that's been really interesting, and I do believe that that's going to be a persistent kind of take-home. Right. In terms of the actual retail environment, I mean, nobody really knows what it is, although, at least in New York, we have this kind of, enthusiasm at least and hope that, we're
until December, yeah.
But we're a city of, fervent kind of mutation and reinvention, So
do you think this it's because it's interesting because we started this conversation talking about how everyone wants to bring you into their store to give you a makeover and analyze your tread pattern and all that. Mm-hmm. A lot of that is contingent on people feeling safe in these environments, and I think no matter what, it'll be a while before people feel totally comfortable. Will we just pick up where we left off? Is it going to be that plus health and safety? Like, is service retail going to just come ripping back once people feel safe? Plus safety, service plus safety.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Yes, I mean, I think that we will definitely see a return to the retail environment in a way that very much values that kind of a more meaningful kind of service-based, value add. Otherwise, why not stay at home and shop online?
Right.
Exactly. So that and
right.
I think that definitely is something that these past few months have really driven home to us. That brands are really digging for purpose. And that's something that's been a very internal process that I think everybody has really been digging deep, to find that value.
No, I feel like it was already hard. People were already struggling with this idea of how can we get people to come into stores, and now it's like, no, but really, like how can we really get people to come into stores? Right. Gotcha. Do you think, going back to the trade, do you think there's going to be any, long-term impact on how you personally shop as a designer? Like, are you eager to get back into design centers and go back to trade showrooms? Are you happy with the digital experience you're having there? Tell me about your own shopping.
Yeah, I think that design professionals are extremely eager to get back to the physical environment, primarily because it is fundamentally tactile. We have to kick the tires. We have to see what the fabrics feel like. We have to, be able to convey that to clients. And so, and then the flip of the coin, we also want to be able to have the human interactions as well.
Right.
So,
Gotcha. So you're gonna be back in the D&D in a couple weeks. Gotcha. Cool. Well, Justin, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to chat.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Very much appreciate it.